It's great problem solving skills. This is what I'm trying to make sure I don't create in our students who can't figure out the problem solving process. CJ, you tell me when you're ready.
I am ready.
All right, so we're going to jump into this because I'm late again. Well, thank you all for coming. Is there anyone online by chance?
Yeah.
All right. Well, kudos to them for jumping online. I told my husband he should jump online and learn some things since he can't seem to quite figure it out either. Like, here's the session. Come on in. All right, so this session is specifically on Empower Learning. And Empower Learning is our platform where we culminate examples of student work. It's also where the student work assessments are kept. That's where really that mastery of learning shows up with the evidence that they've mastered that particular standard. So we'll go through a little bit of this. None of the principals are with me because they are doing all the things this morning with students that happen in the mornings, but always available. They're always willing to meet. Teachers as well, if it's specific classroom questions, around a particular classroom performance of a student, it's probably best to start with the teacher because each teacher does have some flexibility and autonomy in some of the things that they set up. There are some things that are non-negotiable for us, but there are some things that they can adjust based on kind of their own style as a teacher. But Ms. Luter, she's actually up in the office with me. She takes care of system-wide curriculum and instructional practices, and then of course Mr. Fennell and Ms. Sanford are rocking it at the schools. So we'll do a quick overview. I'll do a little bit about our strategic priorities that we're working on in Empower with our proficiency scales. That's a huge component for us right now, is ensuring that those are aligned and that they're progressively moving up for each grade level. Some of that has to be adjusted because of the new standards. We have new math and English standards in the last 2 years. So that has been a bit of a journey. ELA we've had this is the second year, but math was brand new this year. So we've just got to go back and do some crosswalks and make sure that kind of what we worked on previously is adjusted and makes sense at the levels that we have it across the board. I should have deleted that slide. What is the purpose of Empower Learning? Truly, it's a streamlined, consistent assessment of standards for our students. It's personalized for each grade level. The standards that are in a grade level are designed specifically for that grade level, and they come out of the state standards. So we pull them out, we identify, in our case, and in everybody's case, so if you've ever looked at standards, you'll see that, ELA for whatever, 6th grade English has got 200 standards. Well, there's no feasible way to cover 200 standards in a year and assess them. So we have to cover them, you have to teach them. That's that's what we do, is we teach the standards. But what we do is identify the standards that we're going to actually measure. So you're going to have some priority standards. That's what you see in Empower. So when you see your students, these are the standards that they need to master. Those standards have been identified as the priority standards. The students must know this in order to go on to the next level. Under that priority standard, there may be 10 substandards that the students work on in class and informally master, but they're not going to be able to master that big standard without those 10 substandards. So that's ultimately, when we talk about consistent assessment of standards, that assessment piece is important. We're not assessing every standard formally in Empower, that we're prioritizing the most important ones that they must know before they go to that next grade level. It is customizable in that sense. The customizable piece in regard to curriculum all has to go through the administration. So we don't take anything out of that back part of the standards platform without it being a consistent decision among the administration. So if there's a change in those standards, that's a process that we go through. Teachers can't just take standards out and put standards in. That's we run that part of it, so that's monitored on the backside of the program. The clear communication for student regarding performance and pace. So for students, they're able to see their year all at once, right? I mean, you guys know from day one, these are all of the things that we're going to have to cover, and that pace bar lets them know, am I on pace? Now, there's some myths related to this around, well, kids can turn in their work whenever they want, right? So we were having that conversation the other day. That's definitely not the case. There are deadlines, and in some cases, once that deadline passes, if the teacher is moving on to something else, that particular piece may not be applicable anymore. So they're going to have to show mastery in a different way, and then that becomes the student's responsibility. So we're going to do some clarifying documents for that for next year. That's some of the work in our continuous improvement team, is really clarifying grading on that aspect. Because when we shifted from the Summit model, Summit did allow them to go in anytime and do anything. But I think some of just that residual conversation over time is, well, we can turn it in whenever we want. We can wait till May. Well, you really can't. But some of the mechanisms we've put in place to have that not be the case haven't been able to come to fruition. The 2-week fall break and 2-week spring break, one of the purposes of that, one is to let teachers recoup, because our environment is hard and PBL is hard, and you just need time to get away and have some breathe time, recharge. The other piece of the 2-week break, which we have not been able to facilitate except for one time in our second year, is any student that's behind on anything for that first 9 weeks is coming to tutoring that first week. So that's why in all the correspondence with fall breaks, you'll hear me say, take your vacations the second week, because if a student is behind, we want to get them in here that first 9 weeks and get them caught up. Because in theory, no kid should really ever be more than 9 weeks behind. Psychologically, when kids get more than that, they just give up. A kid at Christmas that's already, failing 50% of the standards or not mastering 50% of the standards, in all likelihood will just give up because they don't feel there's any sense of overcoming that. So part of the goal with that 2-week fall break is to get students in and provide tutoring and get them caught up, so when they come back after break, now I can focus on what I need to focus on for the next 9 weeks and the next 9 weeks. So just a little insight and purpose behind that. We have not been able to do that because of COVID and hurricane. It was COVID, hurricane. So I don't know. We're going to try it again next year, and hopefully we can actually get our breaks like we intend. That time also gives teachers time to look at data from Empower, look at where students are performing, and adjust as needed for the next quarter, should they need to do that.
Sorry, as parents, would we, I guess, if say our child needed to come in during that week, or
yes,
one of those weeks during the 2 weeks, would we get a heads up?
Yes.
Like
Yes.
some of us travel for or whatever because of it, so that way we know to plan for it.
Yes, so even when the calendar goes out, I say to parents, please don't schedule travel during that first week. You can pretty well know, if your student is a struggling student or has struggled previously, that's who we're emphasizing. Most kids, honestly, most of our students right now do a really good job of staying on track. We only have a handful, I feel like, that we just continuously, deal with. At most level, it's 4 or 5. You'll see kids, maybe get a little behind and just need a little bit. Your middle school and freshmen, but mostly your like upper high level, like high school kids have it figured out. By the time they hit 10th grade, most of them figure it out. Sometimes the males are a little slower with that. Not anything against males, that's just the trend data. We still love them and help them. But yes, you would know in advance. And the teachers would be communicating that. And you as a parent in that platform would be able to see it. If they're missing more than half of their standards, that would be a trigger for, all right, we need to do some catching up and some individual, focus time here to get you back on track. Good question. And you guys can, I hate that people aren't coming and learning, but at the same time, it does give us the opportunity to be a little more informal. And feel free to ask the students questions, because you both have used it now for 4 years. Yeah.
We were here since Summit.
Yeah, you should just be doing this, not me. That's the other piece of that is the backside of it that nobody sees, but the administration and the teachers, are those standards. And that standards data is what we use to look at, are we successful in how we're delivering these particular standards? You know, if you're looking at, you know, in 5th grade and you pull an ELA standard and, you know, 75% of the students are passing that standard, but you've got 25% that aren't, then you start drilling into, okay, is that 25% in one classroom versus another? Is it, okay, how did we teach it? You know, what did we deliver, you know, that created this issue? And sometimes that's super fast to figure out and sometimes it's not. But the goal is for us to be looking at that data incrementally over time to make sure that, you know, we're not missing something or that we're not doing something that's preventing students from learning in that particular unit of study or that particular standard or focus area. So that's the backside of it that is really meaningful for us. Like there's a lot of data that we can pull that we can have conversations with teachers about regarding their instruction, regarding how they're conducting their classes. But it also is good feedback for us in terms of student performance. We can really see where our students are, and especially when we look at projecting, you know, where we're going to be on state testing. You know, we're constantly looking at, you know, how many students are going to, you know, meet this criteria, and you know, what grade are we projected to get at this point? And you know, if there are kids on that bubble, you know, we can pull data and be able to go, all right, you know, these 6 students are really close. They need, you know, this particular standard. Let's do some small group work with them and see if we can't help push them over the line to get them where they need to get to. So that's the back part of it, and that really is the part that, as much as it is awesome for the students to have the personalized learning piece, it's incredibly important for us to have good data. Good data in is good data out. Crummy data in is crummy data out. And a lot of the systems, including like a focus system where it's just averages, doesn't tell us anything about the standard and what the students are doing. A lot of your assessment models now are catching on, and so you can purchase assessment systems that do a pretty good job of, you know, here's the standard, here's the score, but it doesn't put it all in a place that's meaningful where everybody can use it like Empower does. And there are things that I don't love about Empower. We're constantly weighing, you know, the administration, actually, Mr. McFarlane, CJ back there can tell you, I mean, there have been days that I'm like, I'm done, just pull the plug. I'm not doing it anymore. I'm sick of it, I'm not. But when you really look at what it brings to us, and they're very willing to work with us because they're also trying to design a system that works for schools like us that are innovative and that do need and desire to communicate to students where they are performance-wise and communicate to parents where their students are performance-wise in their learning. All right, we're going to go through some of this, individual data. So here's the backside of it. And I'm not going to get like super deep into this, but when you look at, so in our world, you have strands, which are the big kind of picture items, and then you have standards that fall under those strands. So on the left in white, you'll see the strands. So in this case, I just screenshotted some, but reading informational text, reading prose and poetry, reading across genres, communicating through writing. And then out to the right, you'll see the different standards. And you'll see where we want those standards mastered. If you look on the left side of the blue at the bottom where it says 3.0 or 2.5, that's what we're saying would be mastery of that standard. So not only are we picking the standards, but we also can pick at what level, you know, we want them mastered at. Do they have to have a 3 in order to get mastery, or on our rubric, are we saying a 2.5 is mastery? And so sometimes early in the year, you'll see a standard that comes up that says 2.0, and the child gets 2.0, and the parent will say, well, I want them to get a 3. Well, it's not a 3 level. It's only a 2 level standard. Some standards are more rigorous than other standards. They're still important, but they're more rigorous. So it comes down to rigor. So when you see that 2 or a 3, it's about rigor of the standard and the depth of learning that we expect a student to perform at. So think of it as...
So they're not average, sorry to interrupt. Like,
Yeah.
You know, like if you get a 2, a 2, a 2, a 2.5, and a 3, that's not, as long as it meets the standard.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's the part where people get hung up on.
I actually think for the teachers you're sitting out because I didn't understand, like, he got 100,
Yes.
but it's a 2.5. It's
Yes.
because that standard
It's
is
because that
a
standard
2.5.
is not a 3-level standard.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like I'm so ingrained on this 100 scale. you
Yeah,
know,
and then like,
Yeah.
3 is
that's
where we
what-
want to be, 100 should be a 3, but that,
Okay, that part I didn't know.
that was my question.
Yeah.
2.5s could also be 100.
Mastery.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's not an average level.
Yeah, you have.
Sorry,
But maybe I'm not articulating it well, right? I mean, that's part of this is me. It helps because somebody had asked me that at some point, and so though I said, well, we'll actually just capture that
I
slide.
think seeing the version that she has
Yeah,
Yep.
makes that more clear.
because it tells you the standard and that he got 100, but it's
Yep.
equivalent of a 2.5, and that's what the
So maybe,
standard's
like,
rigor
show
is.
a little visual like that, like
Yeah.
this is 2.5 is.
Yeah, they
100,
have
but,
mastered it.
Yeah.
Yeah, because what'll happen is that 2.5 standard, either later in the year or potentially at the next grade level. It depends on when it falls in the, so there's lots of things that, you know, the DOE, when you map out standards and when they fall and when you're covering them. So it may be a 2.5 this year, but that standard is going to ramp up. It's going to have more language in it. It's going to have deeper knowledge. So the next year, it may be a 3 to actually show mastery, you know, at a different grade level. But what happens, the neat part about this, so this is the piece that's incredibly important, especially over time for us, because you want to be able to look at data over time. And we're 5 years in. You know, this is year number 6. So we've not even had high school, 3 years we've had high school, right? So our data is very limited to that time frame. But what we want to do is be able to track an Ella Treece from kindergarten all the way through, because her data rolls. So whatever standards she's covering this year, those same standards, like all of her data rolls up with her. So by the time she's, you know, coming into middle school, we should be able to go back and see her performance across the board, and did we have gaps? And not just with one student, but collectively. You know, you can look at that data as a whole. You know, this particular group of students, you know, especially now that, I mean, we've got some big classes of kids that are going to hopefully come all the way through. That will give us some really powerful data. You know, by the time they finish elementary, okay, let's look at their K-5 experience. You know, we said they were going to master all of these standards. Here they are. Here's the performance of those over time. Where did we dip? Where did we, you know, grow? Those are all important questions for us to ask, and to be able to correlate it back to what was happening in the classroom at that time. This year is going to be, we know we will take some dips in ELA and probably math because we have new curriculum. Anytime you onboard new curriculum, you're going to see a dip in performance of students, because typically with new standards and new curriculum, the rigor increases. The companies, I mean, that's just what happens. I mean, they write it in, and so it gets harder. And so you'll hear the teachers every year when you implement new curriculum, you know, the kids are really struggling. They don't know, and first grade didn't do their job, and, you know, the fourth grade teacher, the third grade teachers didn't do their job. But it typically is just that learning curve of implementing the curriculum, you know, getting the students used to just different platforms, different delivery styles of teachers. All of those things factor in. But at the end of the day, data is what's going to drive all of the decision making around what it is that we need, what resources we need, what PD do we need, you know, and again, ultimately, we want to collect this data over time. So these same standards are going to be standards that are covered in the next grade level and the next grade level. They just increase in rigor as they go. All right, I don't want to belabor it. So again, here's this slide is going to show you the standard. So the middle section, those gray boxes are the standard. This is the standard that's being measured. This is an assignment on primary, secondary, and tertiary sources. The student is going to identify within both primary and secondary sources the author, the audience, the format, and the purpose of the significant historical documents. Well, in this particular case, the goal score for this standard is a 3, but this particular student earned a 2. Well, this was so that assignment was in October, the second one was in September, so that was early in the year. So that's probably accurate, right? I mean, they haven't had a whole year in there, so they're not going to probably be mastering those. This is their probably first or second maybe project around those particular standards. Will you have a kid that's a one-off here and there that'll get a 3? Yeah. I mean, especially if they're gifted in an area or really strong in an area, you may see some kids early on get 3s. Like, then that's okay too. But what we don't want to do is push them up. We want to dig deeper. Like, so we want to have them applying that content at a deeper level instead of just going through, because we've got some mentality about, well, I've already, finished 5th grade math, I want to go to 6th grade math. Well, you finished 5th grade math at the level, of expectation for, the average of everybody. But if you're truly gifted in that, then, or it's coming naturally to you at that point, what we want to do is have them apply that content in different ways. We want them to apply it to real life. That's where PBL comes in. That's where we should be pushing kids, in those PBL projects or passion projects to develop around the standards, but to develop that application at a much deeper level. Does that make some sense? All right. This is an example. So on the side to the left, the 3.0, the 2.5, that's the goal score. Excuse me, these are the assignments that are attached to it as well. So again, and I'm taking only screenshots, so there are other standards that are coming into play here that it's not kind of showing you the whole picture. But I just like to show parents, when you've got the standards, you also have the assignments that are listed with those standards right below it so that you can see it. The other critical part of, it's going to get loud here for a few minutes, so they know the drill. I mean, it's not super loud, I don't think, for kids, but we'll pause here for just a minute.
While they change glasses.
Yeah. I should pause and let you guys speak for a minute to anything that I've covered up to this point that you want to share anything about. Well, you can think about it for a second. Once we change, we'll because this starts getting into especially some of the things that impact the students a little bit more. Fortunately for us, we have a lot of veteran teachers, so you see a lot of feedback. I probably see more feedback at this school than any school I've ever been at. Yes, did somebody have a question?
Someone watching online just texted me a question.
Yes.
But you're still muted, so you might want to wait to answer.
I'm muted online?
I guess. In high school with Empower, how does that translate to a student's transcripts that need to be submitted for dual enrollment, scholarships, or they want to know their grades each quarter and not just at the end of the year? It's like you talked about it being cumulative.
Yep. So there's a conversion chart.
But if you're going to print their grades mid-year and they haven't showed mastery because they can't because you're building to that, like how do you?
So we have a process for that because we have students that move or when we have students that move in all the time. So we're also converting grades in and we're converting grades out. And that really requires us to take a look at those, especially for middle and high school. You have to look at transcripts and you have to really see kind of where they were in the process. We don't make kids go back and redo material, right? It's whole the mastery. If we can give them a quick assessment and see where they are, then we know kind of where to start them. And that helps us figure out, where they are. But for transcripts and grades, there's a conversion. And actually, if they want to go online, we have a question and answer sheet on there, and we've put it out there for everybody. The conversion is there. You can see it, and it walks you step by step how it's done and what that process is. And it answers a lot of other questions about Empower as well. I was going to pull that up before we left if we had time. But if they go on the website and they go under, I think it's under Empower Learning, you'll see it's a question and answer sheet. Our teachers did it probably October or November, but it had the questions that consistently came up. We came up with the 10 or 12 most asked questions and put those on there with the answers. The teachers helped create it, and that conversion is closer to the bottom, I think, but it's on there for people to see. Yep. Again, this is just part of the platform. Ladies, do you guys want to, why don't you guys take this, right? You know what this is.
Okay, yeah.
You go for it.
So this is where if you press the playlist browser, it shows you every single assignment that has been assigned, and you can see what you're missing and how long it's been missing for and what you need to catch up on. It tells you what you're going to be working on next, so you can see ahead, and if you are completed, you can work ahead if your teacher allows that. And then with the activity growth bar on the left side, it shows if you have missing assignments, it's going to show if you're at the standard you reach, if you're ahead, if you're on pace, that means you're just where the teacher wants you to be. If you're behind pace, that means there's clearly some standard that you haven't mastered yet and you need to work on that. And then if you're ahead of pace, then you're solid. You're soaring through the class. Like, you're going to be easy for the rest of the year.
I got a question.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you'll be able to answer this. So that lets you know the assignment that is done or not done, right? But is it the actual assignment, or is it just let you know what assignment it is? Like, as a parent, can I log in there and see what the assignment is, what they're supposed to be?
You can click on the assignment, and when you click on an assignment, it takes you to what's called their locker, where you can see the document that they're filling out. And if they've turned it in and how far they are along on the assignment. And then the pace bar that she was talking about earlier is right there, and it tells you if you're behind, ahead, or on pace, which is actually really helpful because you can see where you're at in the year, and it moves along as you go along the year.
So everything that the student sees, you can see. So if they say that you can't, I don't know the answer. They'll circumvent the Thursday email sometimes for a week because by the time the teacher
missed assignment.
yeah, because the missing assignment email goes out on Thursday. So sometimes we'll get this, well, nobody told me. Well, it's most of the time we can go back and see the history of the document and what the student actually had in there and that they circumvented the system. So, sometimes that happens, and we're getting more savvy about how to catch some of that, but, it just, students are smart. Like, we're raising, as say, we want to raise critical thinkers. I have told students, hack my system. Like, that way we can make it better. The more feedback we can get from them on, how it's done and what they're doing, then we can put things into place that prevent it, or at least make us aware and go, all right, show me your document, show me your history. What was in here actually, last week at this time, and it gives you. Every time that they change or do anything in a document, it tells you time by time. Yeah, second by second. It doesn't. You don't have to save in Google. It saves for you every keystroke. So even in my documents, if we're sharing a document, working on something, and somebody accidentally deletes something, you can restore a certain version at a certain time to get it back to what you want. So
I've got 2 questions. When do they start?
Beginning of the year. Like, all assignments are always starting.
Level, because like I've got a first grader, and so he has no assignments.
Oh.
oh, you're yeah.
You go along. Like, the teacher will tell you what assignment to do. They'll tell you the standard that you need to complete for that assignment, and you'll do it at that time.
Well, but like what I'm saying is like my first grader isn't typing on the computer, turning things in.
I'll answer.
Okay.
So we're in the process now. We actually have a document that defines what it should look in K1, what it should look like in second and third, what it should look like in fourth and fifth. In fourth and fifth, they should be using it full throttle. Like they should be building playlists. Now, that said, we have brand new teachers that were hired this year that aren't quite there yet. So it's a process to learn all of the widgets and nuances to Empower. So some of them are going to, if they've been here 4 years teaching, they're going to be much faster, and their Empower is going to look more robust than a first-year teacher. Usually after that first semester, they start really figuring it out, and they're able to build the playlist faster and get things in. And even as a student, they know that. I mean, the teachers, they're getting the training the week before school, and we're helping them with that. And we have people that support and do trainings after school, but it still takes a little while to make it look like we want it to look. But it does. It's because it's not a surface level program. It has lots of layers. There's a lot that teachers can build in. Once it's in there, it's really nice because it rolls over every year and they can just tweak what they want. But getting it in there initially is harder. The other piece with kindergarten, first grade is how much can a kindergarten first grader do?
They're doing sight words. That's not going to be a document you type.
Yes, and what we don't want teachers doing are things that aren't productive, right?
Oh yeah.
Am I on? Oh yeah. What I don't want them to do, I don't want to burn teachers out by going, okay, you have to log every single thing you're doing.
Oh yeah.
Of course they have to know sight words. Of course they have to know these things. So we're really trying to identify, what do we want to capture for parents? What is it important for a parent to see and know? You should know the units. So we're thinking, the unit title should be in there. Some of the activities should be listed. You're getting that stuff home in a folder. I get it home for Ella. But like Ella's teacher was typing out standards, stapling it to the paper, and like scoring on that standard. And I'm like, no. Like, no. That's a lot of extra work, for 25 kids that doesn't need to be done. So that made us go back and go, okay, what makes sense? What needs to go home, and what do we need to capture and Empower? And really with Empower, it's about what do we want to track over time. So it's going to look much smaller and more condensed for K1 than it does for third. When they're in third, that's a critical year because they have to pass the reading test. And we need to know where they are. And if they don't pass that reading assessment and they do the portfolio option, you've got to have those documents curated and ready for that point at the end of the year. So those should probably live in Empower. That will improve with some time once we figure out what we really want that to look like and what makes sense.
Like I wasn't expecting my first grader to have assignments there because he's not at that level. Just wondering when
it should have evidence. That's really the conversation we're having now, is even if all of the activities aren't in there, we should be attaching evidence to the standards.
There's evidence. It's just not his, obviously. I was expecting his work, but when to expect his typed work in there.
Yeah. And it's a conundrum, right? Because I love technology, but at the same time, like I don't want them sitting on technology all the time. And in order to get the data quick and the feedback quick, so for higher level kids even, I'm really struggling with the amount of time that we have them looking at the screen. And we all are. We're having this conversation, like you got to have balance. You got to have the engagement, and you got to, and Empower will let you do that if we create the right type of playlists and the right type of activities. Because even with the activities, it can be a hands-on activity. It can say to the student, like, here's what you need to do, and here's what it needs to look like, and you can get your group and start on it. And some teachers do that. I mean, you guys probably have teachers that do that. You do. Again, it's just dependent a lot of times on the background of the teacher and where the teacher is in their journey with Empower.
Is the pace bar customizable to the teacher? Because I know like one PBL might be really science heavy and they're doing that in the second semester, so.
So the pace is determined on the number of standards in the calendar.
Okay.
And when we miss a day of school, it will recalibrate, but it's based completely on the amount of standards. So it's different for every teacher. I mean, some teachers have 20 standards and some have 12. It just depends on what the course is and the length of the course, but that is totally determined by standards and calendar. It pulls our calendar from focus and it adjusts. I mean, it doesn't move because it knows it's 180 days of instruction, and that's what actually CJ could tell you all of that formula for that, but that stays put. You know, if in that first and second year we had too many standards. We had 40 standards for some teachers. Well, by 9 weeks were left and they still had 20 standards to go. Well, we weren't going to master 20 standards. That's what made us go back to that priority standard conversation and those critical concepts. And so we've whittled it down and we've got it down to pretty much, teachers can't pull things out or add things. So that bar is that bar from day one for students. All right, I'm not going to go because I'm out of time pretty much. Let me make sure I'm not missing. There's another. Yeah, pace is super important for students and for parents. That's when I talk to parents, who say, what do I need to know about Empower? Pace. You need to know if your kid is on track. And if it's yellow or if it's not green, you should be asking questions. And clicking on those missing assignments, clicking on what work has been submitted and looking at the quality of the work. If it's submitted, and they have low mastery, 1s and 2s, then start looking at the evidence because odds are the evidence they're submitting is not quality evidence. And so on that rubric, it's falling in a 1 or 2 category because it's just not where it needs to be. And then this is an example of the progress report. So you can pull a progress report every day if you want to on your student. I don't love progress reports with the conversion of the grade on top. That I would say don't pay attention to the A, B, or whatever. Pay attention to what their scores are. Is it a 2.0? Is it a 3.0? I mean, you want to target those areas that they're low performing in. It's personalized. Even for some of our students who are gifted or are working on different projects, teachers can assign different things. So sometimes we will get parents who will say, well, my neighbor's kid is in the same class and they're not doing this. Well, maybe because that kid has already mastered that standard. They don't need that standard. They are doing something different. Like that is accurate. This is not sit and get and regurgitate for everybody. It really is dependent upon your standards. Do you all want to speak to that?
Can I say something about the A-B? Says A or B, but that is the grade that if your kid has stopped doing work for the rest of the year, that is the grade they would get for the rest of the year. So if it says it's a C, it's not a bad thing because they haven't completed every single standard for that year. So it doesn't matter the grade, it matters the grade they get on the standard, the particular standard at that point. That's why those don't matter. The focus grades come out.
You wait until the focus grades come out and see what your overall is.
That's when I care about my letter grade, and I know if I go to that, I'm gonna freak out because
Sorry, when do focus grades come out?
quarterly.
Those at 9 weeks.
Okay, quarterly.
Quarterly. Because I look at the grade and Empower sometimes like that is scary because it's a C, but that doesn't mean that it's a C. It just means completely accurate. So I wouldn't focus on those as much as I would looking at the mastery of the standards.
Yeah, you definitely want to focus on the individual standards. Like when you're standards, right? Yeah. You're looking at what.
Yeah. We're looking at the standards to fix, not the grade.
Yeah.
So the grade on the progress report doesn't necessarily correlate to what's going to go into focus?
No.
It doesn't correlate at all, really.
Yeah, we only did that because parents were losing their minds over not seeing a grade. And even though we said it over and over, it doesn't correlate. It's just to make you feel better because you see a letter grade there, but it doesn't tell you how your kid's performing. And neither does a traditional grade. I mean, it tells you you know, what your version of an A is versus your version of an A, or my version of a C versus somebody else's version. You know, what's an A in one class is an F in another. You know, in the standards-based grading talk, I always talk about my ag teacher. I mean, I really did not do a lot in ag class, and I got an A. I slept most days, to be honest. I've lived on a dairy farm, and I took my easy classes at certain times and in the morning, and all right. I scrolled through some of that pretty quickly, but that gives you the why behind Empower. It doesn't teach you how to use it, but it hopefully shows you why we use it and why it's important, you know, for the standards, for the teachers, for the system data that we use to make decisions on what curriculum, what resources, all of those things. And do you all have anything else to add?
If there's something you would change about it. I know, it's kind of a tough question.
Oh, I have a list.
But as a student, yeah. To make it better for you.
Some of the times that teachers do lock assignments on you, I don't like how it's locked for everyone. And if you miss, and it's locked for you. So I wish it was more of an individual kind of thing rather than,
So you mean like if the assignment's gone too
We just
long,
might need to do training.
you've been locked out of it?
yeah.
Okay.
So, because if it's locked, you can't go back to
can't
it.
go back.
And like if you missed that day, sometimes the assignment will get locked, and you won't be able to do it. You have to talk to the teacher, and they can unlock it, and it's a whole thing.
Understandable that they do need to get locked at one point and we shouldn't be able to go back. ever,
Yes,
but-
but that's after like a certain amount of time has passed. Like that standard's done. We've already done that. You don't have to do it again. So.
All right. Any other questions? I hope it was helpful. It's a little different one than I've done previously, but it's, I hope it's meaningful. Well, it's so important for the backside. That's, you know, I don't get to talk about that because everybody just wants to know how to navigate it. But there's more to it than just the student platform. That part is super important, but it's also important for us to get good data. So, all right, ladies. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Because I literally did pull them at the last second. Thank you.